Welcome back to the Nano Cruising Podcast. I'm Stefan Marceau, your host. This is the podcast where we talked about dinghy cruising, trailer sailing, a lot of small boat adventures. Today we have someone who pushed the boundaries of small boat cruising, Howard Rice. He's a great storyteller, and he's literally gone to the end of the earth with his boats. Let's get to that conversation. So today I'm joined by Howard Rice, a sailor adventurer, a teacher whose voyages have pushed the boundaries of what's possible in small craft. Hi, Howard. I think so. You've sailed around Cape Horn on a Klepper, if what I remember. It's a canoe or a kayak. I don't remember.
Yeah. Yes, it was. Thank you, first of all, for having me here. I feel a bit humbled that I would be considered. In any case, that aside,
You're more than qualified. So.
Well, thank you. One man's opinion. I did actually some years ago prepare for and take a voyage in a Klepper Arius 1 that I customized in a number of ways or modified, and spent 91 days sailing south twice around Cape Horn and then west up the Beagle Channel to the glaciers and then back to Puerto Williams. 91 days total.
Right. So before we get too deep, we'll cover those voyages, but I just wanted to know, I'd love to know, what is deep down that you've been searching for every time you push off on a tiny boat in those places? You go to some limits of the world for a small boat. So tell us about the inspiration to go to Cape Horn and to go to Tierra del Fuego, for example, in a SCAMP.
Well, that's a really good question. I hope I have an answer for you. I've always been intrigued by, obviously, what I don't know. And each time since I can remember being a human, as an infant, maybe 5 years old, I was tagged by my parents as doing wild and crazy things. Sort of, I would sort of leap before I look. And I've amended that through life. Now I prepare meticulously. I'm intrigued with sort of the cracks and crevices of the world that are never trod by humans. The known world is known, and to me it's a little mundane. So I try to go to places where few people have gone. And just to sum that up, I don't want to go on about it. I am 100% sure that on a recent voyage I made aboard a boat that I built, a little under 12-foot boat called a SCAMP, that I walked on a part of the earth that no human foot had ever stepped on. And that felt, I may be wrong, but I'm sure nobody had been there. And that was quite a feeling. So I'm very intrigued with exploring the nooks and crannies and crevices of the earth that are best accessed by small boat.
That's amazing. That's great. Thank you. So tell us about the Cape Horn where you were starting to talk about with the Klepper that you've customized. So you wanted to go there and to do and you did it twice, I believe.
I did. That was really I'm currently authoring a book, and I don't know if I'll ever publish it because it's a little bit of a look at me kind of book, and I don't know if I like that kind of thing. But the detail, I'll try to do a Cliff Note version of that Cape Horn trip.
We still want the book. So.
Okay. Yeah, $1.95 at your local drugstore. In any case, what was most intriguing about that trip to me were the 2 years of preparation I put in to go there. And that preparation stemmed from working with my training partner and best friend, Eric Stiller, to sitting for, periods of time. At the time I had a television. I haven't owned one since in my adult life. And I would put my hands in 2 pans of ice water to, condition them. I trained in winter conditions. Right. There was one day that Eric and I were out and a helicopter. We were out on the Hudson River, of all places. He lived in New York at the time, and it was 15 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, and the news came out with a helicopter, and what do New Yorkers do on the coldest day of the year? And we were completely iced up. Our bodies, our heads were like ice helmets, our boats were iced up. And although I never faced that extreme when I was in Tierra del Fuego on that 91-day voyage, it made being there so much easier because I had gone to that extreme.
Right.
And that voyage was rather difficult. And I must say that the Cliff Note version of that voyage is, I may have been alone for the better part of 91 days, but in actuality, the best part of that voyage were the people that I encountered, both before and at one point during the trip, and then at another point during the trip. The solo part was very intriguing, very challenging, but it was really the interactions I had with the 3 Armada lighthouse keepers on Cape Horn, and then later when I sort of helped with the semi-rescue or assistance to a German kayaker who I met far west in the Beagle Channel. Those were very meaningful to me.
Wow, that's amazing. That's great. We hear people that say, you don't need to go to Cape Horn with the small boat. You can find your own Cape Horn, but you've actually done that. So that's amazing. And then tell me about the trip with the SCAMP, to do, I mean, that was a very good trip too, and very arduous. I think you didn't succeed, I think, what you wanted to do, but you succeeded in different ways in pushing the limits of what the SCAMP can do. So for people that don't know about your trip, can you fill us in a little bit on that trip?
Sure. Well, it all harkens back to my first trip to southern Chile, and being out in the Southern Ocean in a 15-foot wood canvas sailing canoe. And then the subsequent trip that I made from Cape Horn back up north into the Beagle Channel. Then I pushed west as far as Timbales, which is in the northern arm of the Beagle Channel. And as I pushed west and into the westerlies, that was really as challenging as, almost as challenging as double rounding the Horn. I looked into the Southwest Islands, and I was completely intrigued, and I really wanted to go there. It sounds a little corny, but it was sort of like looking at the dark side of the moon, because there were places on the chart that were literally, the depths were not charted. And it doesn't mean that no one had been there, but no one in modern times had been there. The Chilean Armada, the Navy, doesn't go there because it's too dangerous. They only go there with 2 patrol boats or 2 helicopters, one to rescue the other.
Right.
It's a really challenging place to go. And back at that time, I said, I'm going to come back.
Right.
I was so intrigued. And that was on about day 84 of my voyage. And then I turned and went back to Port Williams. And so as way leads on to way, life gets in the way. I ended up in a career managing regattas all around the world, including the Olympics and North America and European championships, all of that.
Mm-hmm. And
then lived in Micronesia as a college professor for a number of years. I kept putting it off. And then finally I realized that this life is not a rehearsal for something else, that I had to get to it. And I guess that's what motivated me. And so the get to it part started to look like reality because I was older and still very fit to this day. I don't drive a car. I only ride a bicycle, and I stay in really good condition. So I never have to tune up before I do something. And so I planned a voyage, a long-held dream, to sail from Goose Bay, Labrador to Sissemoot, Greenland, north via the coast of Labrador, crossing the Hudson Strait, and jumping off from Baffin Island at Cape Dyer and then crossing the Arctic Sea to Sissamut in lieu of going back to Chile, because the reason I was able to do Chile, Tierra del Fuego and Cape Horn back in the day was that at that point in my life, I was a lot younger. I had very little money, and I never have accepted sponsorship. I don't go after money. I don't ask people to help me. I like to be independent so that I'm free. And so at that time, the logical way to do that trip was to do it in a folding boat, in a Klepper. Mm-hmm. And so that cost about $13,000. I sold my car. I did many things as young people do. Mm-hmm. But this time, it was different. I wanted a different kind of boat. And so I began working with a naval architect in Genoa, Italy, Flavio Filocci, on a design of my own and sort of vetting it through him.
Okay.
And then my friend Josh Colvin, Small Craft Advisor magazine, sent me the initial drawings, I think it was, and photographs of a boat to be. Yeah. And that was this 11-foot, 11-inch SCAMP. And John Welsford, the designer, was a lifelong friend. And as soon as I saw the drawings, I said, that is better than what I'm currently penning for myself. There are certain attributes about that boat that I can talk about later. Yep. It just resonated with me. It met the base criteria for the proper platform that I could modify into a small micro voyaging boat. Mm-hmm. And so before the prototype was built, I was living in Pohnpei, Micronesia at the time. I contacted a Small Craft Advisor and I purchased 2 kits. The boat was just being offered as a kit as the prototype had was being finished. And my plan was to build hull number 2 stock and learn from sailing it, and then build number 3 and modify it relatively dramatically to meet the conditions that I would face sailing to Greenland, because shipping a boat like that to Tierra del Fuego would be exorbitantly expensive. So I thought, well, I can just drive from northern Michigan up through Canada to Goose Bay, launch, leave my vehicle or give it away and take off and have another experience. So what happened is that as I was collaborating with John Welsford on my modifications, one thing led to another. I started teaching these SCAMP camp boat builds. We did the first one together where we built 9 of them in Port Townsend, Washington. And it was at that time that I was deeply researching the coast of Labrador and Baffin Island, and there had been a remarkable spike in polar bear encounters. And because the polar ice cap, sorry, that's the wrong term, the scree ice that often is along the shoreline in the springtime had somehow moved further offshore, and polar bears, females with their cubs, were now more likely to be at the shoreline hunting for food. And I wasn't planning to vector a course straight from Goose Bay to Sissamut. I wanted to explore the coastline, all the little spots. And I knew that I would encounter polar bears. And I could not figure my way around that.
And polar bears do see you as a meal, so yeah. Absolutely.
And one night, this literally happened to me. I had a dream where 2 big white paws were on the coaming of my SCAMP, pushing it down, and I was at anchor, and the rest of the story you can figure out. So I decided I couldn't carry a polar bear an electric fence. I couldn't carry a gun, and it didn't work. And so I immediately said, well, hey, my dream has always been to go back to the Southwest Islands of Tierra del Fuego. I'm just going to do it.
Right.
And so some friends of mine assisted me by building a wooden crate. I took the better part of 4 years to build my SCAMP. I would do it in the summertime breaks between academic semesters. And I built a horse for that course. That boat is very specific to that part of the world. I changed the rig from a lug rig to a yawl rig with all kinds of different sail permutations, everything operable from the cockpit. I put it in the crate, and I shipped it to Punta Arenas, Chile. And then I went down to Chile. John Welsford joined me in preparation, and then I departed from Punta Arenas and spent a total of 62 days living aboard, and did get into the Southwest Islands, a place that Joshua Slocum referred to as the Milky Way, which is an incredibly confusing scattering of islands with tremendous currents and strong winds and willy-was, and had the experience of a lifetime, for sure. Good and bad, the experience of a lifetime.
I was going to ask how you selected the SCAMP. You covered that. That's great. So.
Well, let me just really quickly elaborate on that. Some people look at a SCAMP, which is an excellent design, but they stumble over the pram bow. That's one of the very few things that people find at fault with that boat, because they don't understand it.
Oh, really?
And
okay. I didn't realize.
The pram bow is a storied shape through history in a number of countries.
Of course.
And the SCAMP at 11 feet 11 inches has tremendous volume forward, and there's no need for that extra 3 feet or whatever it would be. It makes the boat easier to build. It offers that fullness forward. It has a very short 10-inch stem, and that's incredibly important for me. And that's the main reason why I picked it, aside from the offset centerboard and the water ballast. That was the number one reason, the short stem, because in the Southern Ocean, where I'd been before, I could experience waves of between 20 and 40 feet. Of course, the fetch between waves might be 200 feet, but surfing down the face of a wave, and that short stem, as opposed to a long stem, allows for kind of like bump skiing, very quick turns, and it would negate the tendency of a long, shapely bow to root, or to make the hull asymmetric and shoot off to starboard or port, which then causes the helmsman to oversteer and possibly starts the oscillations leading to a capsize. So that short stem was the main reason I picked the design.
Wow.
It wasn't the pram bow. I love shapely boats, at the fullness forward. And then the pram bow itself won't stuff or purl into the bottom of a wave trough. It'll just bob back up. And that staggering is another reason why a boat might capsize.
Wow. You knew from the design, you already knew these qualities, what it would do in these kind of waves. That's pretty impressive, right?
Yeah, that's why I immediately picked that design over my own design that Flavio and I had worked on off and on for about 2 years. It was superior. I have no qualms about it, saying that I will definitely go with a better idea. I have no ego involved in what I do.
Right. So tell us about that trip, some of the challenges, and I know from example, I think you needed permission to go some of those areas, like you said, even the Navy wouldn't go there as well, right? So
yes, well, when I was there before, I was there at the tail end of the shooting war between Argentina and Chile over the 3 islands in the eastern Beagle Channel, Picton, Lennox, and Nueve. And the Argentinians were in control of southern Tierra del Fuego. They planted landmines all over the place. And that conflict was actually solved by the Pope at that time. He negotiated a settlement. And so that was very difficult for me to actually go there. And I carried an American flag, I carried a UN flag, I carried a Chilean flag, and an Argentinian flag. So if a brown gunboat approached, I would pull out the Argentinian flag. If a black gunboat approached, I'd pull out the Chilean flag. If all went bad, I'd fly the UN flag and hope they wouldn't arrest me or whatever. And so in the end, I ended up being a good citizen to the Chileans because I did what they asked me to do. And I followed their instructions. And at the end of that voyage, they presented me in a little ceremony with a certificate saying that I'd gone around Cape Horn. Completely unexpected. That's cool. So when I decided to go back this time, I needed the regulations that the Armada imposes on any vessel be it commercial, military, or private, that transits the waters of the Strait of Magellan and south. You have to have particular electronic devices on board, including radios, that allow them to track your exact location, latitude and longitude once every 24 hours. And if you don't have that capability, you simply can't go there.
Right.
Because they're a rescue Navy more than they're a fighting Navy, but they're really involved in rescue. And they don't like to do that, rightfully so.
Right.
And so I went to Chile because I respect them. I went there 1 year before my planned voyage, and my friend John Welsford, dear friend, on the phone said, I'm going to go with you.
Yeah.
And he purchased a ticket. He flew in from New Zealand, and he and I met with the Armada in Valparaiso at Armada National Headquarters, and they remembered me. They said, oh, of course, we know who you are. You were here before. These are the things you need to do with your boat. And we're honored that you came here to talk to us. And then we went all the way south to Punta Arenas, and we met with the Antarctic Zone Commander there and his staff. And we filmed all this, and it was really quite amazing because I'd been a good citizen, and some people aren't. Some sailors show up there and do the wrong thing, and their boats are impounded. They're kicked out of the country. So they understood that. And so I knew what I had to do in order for my boat a year later to pass what's called an inspection that allows the Navy to present you with what's called a ZARPE.
Yes.
A ZARPE is a permission to travel. And not all boats pass inspection. And so when I showed up, the Navy came to inspect my boat, and I passed it 100% and was given a ZARPE,
Right.
Which allowed me to travel. And so I was able to leave Punta Arenas with full blessing of the Armada, and my boat was registered, and through my DeLorme, InReach DeLorme, I had to contact them every 24 hours without fail with my latitude and longitude. And then if I failed to do that, then they would wait for some few hours before they pulled the trigger and started a rescue or search and rescue process.
Take us on that voyage. Tell us about that voyage. Obviously, you had to prepare. You've done that. You had to have battery power to have your alarm charge and so on. And tell us about the voyage itself.
Well, the voyage itself was a little bit star-crossed in this regard. The boat I built meticulously and prepared meticulously. Yet there was, as things happened, the day before the semi-truck was coming to pick it up in the crate and ship it to Chile, which was going to take 5 weeks to get there. It was kind of a rush to get it in the crate. I'd never put a boat in a crate before, and my friend Dave Mergener was helping me, and we're using his tractor, and we punched a hole in the front of the crate to put a line through and pull it. And one thing led to another, and there were lots of fall leaves. This was in Michigan, and I had bars laid, off to the side. And in the rush of going over to the lumber yard to buy more lumber to do this job of getting it into the crate, I drove over the mizzen mast, which leaves had covered, and I crushed the mizzen mast beyond repair. And so I rushed off to the lumber yard and purchased Sitka boards, threw it in the crate. But in the process, with 12 hours to go until the truck came to pick the boat up at a local lumber yard loaded by 2 forklifts, I had to leave. I had to make a choice. Do I go for the Sitka so I can build a mast in Chile, or do I rush off to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where all my food was packed and ready to go? I left all my food behind. I made a choice that I was going to have to reprovision in Chile.
Right.
Big decision. So when I arrived in Chile, I went about the process, and John was there, and I shopped, and so I changed my food stores dramatically, and that took some time. The boat was a little late getting there. It got there, and then finally I had it on shore, and I launched it into the Strait of Magellan and decided that I would, what I normally do before any long trip is I acclimate to the environment of the boat and the lifestyle that I'm going to live by changing my diet to the diet I'm going to eat during the trip. So there's no shock to my system, or I don't become lethargic and don't eat, that sort of thing. So I launched the boat into the Strait of Magellan, anchored it out, and began living aboard for 2 weeks. And, was starting to consume my diet and cutting myself off from people and from society. I stopped going into Punta Arenas. I was 7 miles away, and just becoming a person into the solo mindset. And then the day that I wanted to leave, and I had full permission from the Armada, they were fantastic, but they were very concerned about me. Really great people. They said, look, the most dangerous place in southern Chile is not Cape Horn. It's Cape Froward. Okay. Cape Froward is the end of the Brunswick Peninsula, and that's where the Strait of Magellan divides into the west arm and the east arm, and it's really dangerous. Cape Horn is notorious because that's where most ships went around, but Cape Froward is the deal. Okay. And I was going to cross from Cape Froward to the Magdalena Channel, and the Navy was so concerned, they said, we'll send a gunboat to accompany you, or we'll take your boat. And I said, no, I'm on my own. This is why I'm here. I can manage that. And so the day that I was going to leave, with full blessing, I was up that morning. My boat was fully loaded. It was back anchored in the Strait of Magellan. An officer showed up who I'd never seen before, wearing a sidearm on his thigh and kind of strutting his stuff. And he said, you can't go. And I said, well, of course I can go. Here's my Zarpe. Here's my boat. He said, no. You are required. This was in broken Spanish and English. You're required to go to Chile, Armada headquarters and meet with Lieutenant Ortiz. And I said, well, I don't have to do that. Normally, when I would make that trip from Barranco and this Museo Victoria, where my boat was, I could just walk out onto the road and somebody would pick me up without even hitchhiking. That day, nobody picked me up. And it was a little breezy. I wasn't too concerned about it. I walked the 7 miles into headquarters. They didn't know what I was talking about. They said, no, you're good to go. We don't know who that is. Okay. So then I literally ran the 7 miles back to my boat. And as I came to the dirt road leading to the boat, I could see it was on its side. The wind had come up. It blew well over 35 knots. That's why I ran. My boat was washed ashore on its side. And so I had to put on my dry suit, dive into the Strait of Magellan, swim out an anchor it, and then winch my boat off the beach. It was unbelievable. Wow. It was a total mess. My food stores were ruined. I left the boat. Oh, my God. My fault. I left some of the hatches not fully dogged down. So that delayed my departure by 8 days. I had to fully reprovision. I had to take the boat out of the water, flip it on its side, repair the gasket and a few other things. And so then finally I set off. I couldn't wait any longer. I set off on a day that was blowing about 25 knots out of the north. And that ended up being one of the most trying days of my trip, that very first day, because it clocked around to the south on the nose. And I had a fight to get south of Punta Arenas. And then from there, I managed to continue. I crossed the Strait of Magellan at Cape Froward in very challenging conditions. I'm not a drinking man, but people had given me 2 bottles of wine and a 6-pack of dark beer. When I got to a place called Bahia Zigzag, which is actually a place that Charles Darwin had anchored. I anchored in the same spot, in the middle of nowhere, no people, nothing. I drank 4 of those cans of beer. I was a nervous wreck.
Leaving you in a bit of a cliffhanger here. Howard will get into details of the rest of his trip at the next episode, so do come back for that. Thank you to you, my listeners, for spreading the word, telling your friends about the podcast and sharing it. That really helps get the word around. I appreciate that. Do join the Facebook group, nanocruising.com. Don't be shy to participate. Show pictures of your builds, of your boat, sharing stories. We always love that. Join our mailing list at nanocruising.com to make sure you get notified of every new episode. And last, as usual, seize your own adventure.